Okay, so anyways, talking here, what were the reasons for discontent? There are three broad reasons that we talked about for the reasons for discontent in the French Revolution. Number one, broad reasons. Yes?
Overtaxation.
Overtaxation. So they had problems with, I'll go with the economic area. Yes? Political inefficiency. The rulers were horrible. Claudia Dor. Not the entire way. And then the last reason, broad reason.
Social inequality.
There's social inequality, taxing system, the social system, the rights and responsibilities of the common people, they were totally out of whack. And you gotta remember, 98% of the population was the peasants, was the third estate. Those people did not get a fair say in government. So that was the old regime. The old regime was the name for the social and political order in France before the revolution. And social inequality was running really deep. And you gotta be thinking to yourself a little bit over there, in order for the old regime to fall, you had to get rid of the king, you had to get rid of the clergy, and you had to get rid of the aristocracy. And those are some things that you're going to see today as we go about this lesson. So, again, this picture says it pretty clearly on who and why the French Revolution was such an issue. These people, the members of which estate? The third estate. These people, members of which estate? First estate. And then finally, the last member of that last group, they were the second estate. This picture shows it real well because the members of the third estate were carrying the financial burden in France, and the rich people, the aristocracy, and the clergy, they didn't have to pay anything. So we did talk about the social inequality, third estate, second estate, first estate. Pretty much shows exactly the main problem. This sliver of people had all the say in government, and the majority of the people, 98%, had zero say in government. We did talk about how the nobles felt that they did not get a square deal. The nobles thought that the previous kings of France took away the rights and responsibilities to rule in France by the kings. The middle class wanted to have their political power and wealth because they had the knowledge and the understanding of actually, how to run a country, how to escape the financial burden. And then we talk about how the lower class hated the tax burden because they had to pay the majority of the taxes. We talked about the unbalanced tax system. We talked about the calling of the Estates General. Did we get this down with you guys? Calling of the Estates General that had to fix the financial problems in France. Louis was afraid to ask the first and second estates. They had the majority of the wealth, but yet they were the ones that they failed to ask. The Estates General hadn't met since 1614. This was a major breach of responsibilities by the French leadership. To not meet for 175 years, they could have at some point in time within those 175 years solved or come up with a plan for a better way to manage the finances in France, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So all the members of the first and second estates got together. All the members of the first and second estates got together, and the third estate, and they were supposed to bring their cahiers, their problems, their concerns, and try to come up with a solution. The one common thing that all levels of the Estates General came up with was, we need a constitution. I'm probably getting a pretty good glare. And that reduces the glare. They wanted to have a constitution. Okay, it says stop down here, but I'm not stopping. So the Estates General, all three social classes, they needed to try and fix the bankruptcy issue that the French government was going through. Questions? How's that working for you, Jack? Great. All right. So this this is really where the revolution starts to come about. Although you got to understand, a revolution just doesn't happen overnight. Revolutions occur over many dissatisfied years. So when the convening with the Estates General was actually organized, the Third Estate was thinking, yeah, hey, we got an opportunity. We got an opportunity to really dig in here. We got an opportunity to, man, we could do some stuff here. The Third Estate is like, finally, we got a chance. So they met in April of 1789, and the unfortunate thing is, they were disappointed. The Third Estate did not have, I should put it this way, they had too high of expectations. They had to wear black, they had to enter a side door, like they were just, third level citizens of France. So they just had to, there was all this animosity, there was all this, they weren't going to get their fair say. And they said enough. That's enough. We're done. We're not going to do this anymore. We're tired of nobody looking out for us. So once that was all done, when the Estates General presented itself in such a way as it did, the people just, the delegates of the Third Estate, they just up, they left, they went out into an area known as a tennis court, and they sat out there and they decided that they were going to basically form their own government. They had enough, done with this way, now we're going to do anything else. We're going to do anything else our way. So the members of the Third Estate decided that they were essentially going to form their own French government. They had 98% of the population on their side. It's not like it was going to be unfruitful. The forming of the National Assembly, the process of the voting, and what everybody was so upset about, they wanted, in the Third Estate, they wanted popular sovereignty. They wanted to have the ability for the government to be run based on the consent of the governed. Essentially in America, that's how we still are run. We are a popular sovereignty. We don't like something, we don't like our president, we don't like our state representatives, we don't like our mayor, don't vote for them. It is the government based on the consent of the governed. They were really upset with every vote only counting as one per estate. They wanted popular sovereignty. The delegates of the Third Estate then said, we're out of here, and they formed their own government. They were the National Assembly. The National Assembly. And they said, you know what? Finally someone's going to look out for us. Somebody's going to look out for us. Questions that you have. Here's a picture of the Assembly Hall. It's ginormous. And you can see inside of it, there's a boatload of people. There's a boatload of people. This was like Game 7 of the World Series. I mean, that's how popular this was. This was the talk of France. And then when they went off and formed their own government, you can only think that the clergy, and you can only think that the nobles, and you would only think that the king, they were probably thinking, we're in trouble. We are in trouble. So they stepped out and they took this tennis court oath. You guys read about that last time. Tennis court oath, they basically, all the members of the National Assembly, which essential were the delegates of the Third Estate, they promised that they would not disband until a constitution was formed. They would not disband until a constitution was formed. And again, here are these French people, and I bet you a number of these same French people in the lower end of the Third Estate might have been the soldiers that fought in the Revolutionary War that provided the Americans the same freedom that the French people were hoping for. As if it already wasn't bad enough, more hits keep coming. So you got to be thinking when the National Assembly was formed, one of the hits was they counted each vote They counted 1 vote per estate. I mean, because ultimately, what the 3rd estate wanted was 1 vote per person, as opposed to 1 vote per social class. That was a bad thing. Making the 3rd estate wear black, making them enter the side door, those were just punches in the gut. And then more keep coming. On June 27, King Louis XVI, he ordered the 1st and 2nd estates, the delegates of the 1st and 2nd estates, to go and talk to the members of the 3rd estate and try to write a constitution. Go join the National Assembly and try to write a constitution. Well, I think Louis was worried about there being an uprising of other people in the streets that were members of the 3rd estate. These people were sick and tired of being poor. And so what Louis did, and here's another Louis mistake, Louis decided that he was going to send troops into Paris just in case there was an uprising. And I don't know what you're like, but what happens when you feel threatened? If you're in the streets and you already know that you're poor and you're overtaxed and you're hungry, and you know that they mistreated the delegates of the 3rd estate to the point where they had to kind of revolt and join and start their own National Assembly, and then all of a sudden you see in a distance, you see soldiers coming, marching. You know what I'm saying? You feel threatened, wouldn't you? And you can do one of 3 things. You can run, you can go get a weapon, or you can put your hands up and fight. And the members of the 3rd estate that were out, and the common people, the poor people, the peasants in the street of Paris, they said number 1 and number 3. No, number 1 and number 2. They went and found some guns, and they decided that they were going to fight. So they felt threatened, and this is when everything started to go bonkers. I'm not going to give you this. This is in your book, The Tennis Court Oath. You can go ahead and read that on your own. It's just a few words. But this is one of the main themes that the Revolution had. And you look at these I don't know if they're French or Latin. I think they're French. Liberty, equality, and fraternity. They wanted to have freedom. They wanted to have be treated fairly. And they wanted the brotherhood. They wanted to be united with their fellow Frenchmen to come together for a common cause. This was the battle cry of the French Revolution. And you can see, this is the National Assembly. It was brought up in the video if you didn't pay attention to that. These 3 guys down here, they represent the 3 social classes. And these guys up here, what is represented is the chaos that is just about to start with the French Revolution. Everything came to a big boiling head on July 14th in 1789, when thousands of French peasants who were hungry and afraid of the oncoming French military. There were mothers and parents. Because of the taxation, people didn't have money. Because of the strong need for food and the low supply of food, prices of bread were ginormously high. And mothers couldn't feed their kids. And never make a mother mad about her child. Usually it's not a good thing. And if you're trying to take away something that child needs to live, mothers, fathers even get more vicious. And so these mothers decided that, and fathers, it's boatload, they decided, no, it's time to defend ourselves. So they went searching for weapons. Because it was going to be a war. And it turned into it. People heard that there were weapons and there were guns and there were all sorts of different things. And you got to imagine that during this French Revolution, there were anything was used as a weapon. Anything was probably used as a weapon, from sticks and stones to rocks and poles and stakes and you name it. Anything, Nate.
Rocket propelled chainsaw?
I don't think that existed, but hey. So they went two places. They went two places to try and find weapons. Number one is the Hotel des Invalides. I don't know how to pronounce it. The Hotel des Invalides. Now, obviously this is where sick people were. This was a hospital. The Hotel des Invalides was a hospital. And then you had the Bastille. The Bastille was a prison. And somewhere, I don't know why you hide guns in a hospital, but apparently they did. And so, the Bastille, well, it makes more sense that they would hide guns in a prison. So the people heard that there were weapons there, and they went. And then, let's go get them. Well, the hotel, the hospital was no problem. They're not going to go with a whole bunch of sick people in beds are going to defend themselves. Not likely. But when they went to the Bastille ended up, the governor and a bunch of guards got killed, and the people just stormed the Bastille. They went in there, went crazy, they took all the weapons. Now they had all the weapons that they needed to go start this revolution. And it started. The governor was killed, the governor of the Bastille, kind of like the prison warden. So if you're going to look for a date that symbolizes the beginning of the French Revolution, look no further than July 14, 1789. This is recognized as the French Independence Day. This marks the beginning of the French Revolution. And of course, like I said, prior to this, it had been years in the making that the French Revolution was sowing its seeds. It just happened to be, what do they say, the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the major thing that it was the tipping point. Louis XVI, looking out his window in Versailles, he looked amongst all the chaos going on and said, "Is this a revolt?" And that's kind of like, if your parents give you an $80,000 Mercedes and they put it in the driveway, and then your reaction is, "Oh, that's cute." That's an understatement. So Louis XVI, by saying, "Is this a revolt?" No, it's just not some kid that's upset because he didn't get too many sprinkles on his ice cream. No, this is not a revolt. Sir, this is a revolution. Things are going to change in a big way. This is the palace that King Louis XVI lived. This is the palace at Versailles. I think there's like 100 and some odd 50 rooms in this thing. Can't imagine how many bathrooms are there now. But still, look at that thing. He lived in the lap of luxury, while the majority, 98% of France, they lived like peasants. You have no doubt, in my mind, why the people were upset. He has so much, why do we have so little? 6% of the budget. 6% of the budget in France was spent on the king and maintaining Versailles. So that for every $100, $6 was spent on the king. Couldn't that $6 be spent on the poor people? That's what they were getting at. And this is the Bastille. You can see this is the prison. The people are storming it. The French soldiers are trying to do something to fight. And it went down. And all those weapons, these people are angry, and it just was an ugly scene. I would love to have been a person standing a safe distance away on top of maybe this building over here. I would love to have watched everything that was going on during this event. And then Anybody who opposed the revolution, they meant this. This is the guillotine. A weighted steel razor blade that was dropped from a distance, basically removing with no problem whatsoever the head of its victim. And then they started a tradition. That's what we call a pike, a stick, with a nice little, sharp thing on the top. And they would poke the head through the neck and parade the beheaded person's face and skull and whatever all through town. There are some interesting things that happen when they decapitate a person. The reflexes are still going. The brain activity, there's some reflexes, and there's some, I can only imagine how freaky it must have been, but they seem to be quite entertained by this. So, what are the phases of the revolution? It went from nasty to nastier to nastiest, and then eventually it sort of got better. Sort of got better. So after the storm of the Bastille, things just got nastier. Peasants decided, you know what, we've been living the poor life for years, so I want to live the good life, so we're going to go to the rich people's homes and steal their stuff. They plundered the homes of the nobility. And so now, you see, as a result of the old regime and as a result of storming the rich people's homes, now the aristocracy was gone. Check mark on how to construct a revolution. You got to kill the nobles. You got to get rid of the nobles. This brought about an end to the old regime, the old social, the old religious order, the old way of doing things politically in France. So the newly founded National Assembly wasted no time. It talks about in the book, and it talks about in several videos, it says they passed over 1,000 laws within a 2-month span. 1,000 laws. You talk about radical revolutions. This is radical. You want to overturn everything that was once known to be the law of the land and completely change it into something that fit the desires and wants and needs of the members of the Third Estate? Well, you got it. The one thing that they wanted to make sure that they pressed, which wasn't a constitution, not quite yet, was something known as the Declaration of the Rights of Men. DRM, I think that's what I call it later on, just so I didn't have to type Declaration of the Rights of Man 1,000 times. The Declaration of the Rights of Man was signed on August 27th of 1789. Guys, this is just a month and a half after the revolution started, with over 1,000 laws. A month and a half. I mean, that's some steamrolling. I mean, that's like, either do what we say or get out of the way or we're going to run you over. And they just ran people over with a guillotine, probably. So, the Declaration of the Rights of the Man was the French form of the Bill of Rights that we had in America, or the English Bill of Rights that they had in England. And it all came off of the same idea that was formed by the Enlightenment thinkers that came out of France. Montesquieu, Locke, Rousseau, Diderot, all those guys that said all men had equal rights. Well, they're getting equal rights now. But in order to get those equal rights, they first had to get rid of the nobility, the aristocracy, the rich people that were making all of the rules. This is a picture of what the Declaration of the Rights of Man is. I'll wait for you to write all this stuff down, okay? We'll skip that part. They even had a preamble. Hey, what thing of ours has a preamble? Constitution. You know how it goes? I don't know, I can paraphrase it. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, to these do ordain, blah, 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 this Constitution of the United States of America. Paraphrased poorly, but that's the sentiment. So more about the phases of the revolution. I don't think Louis XVI was in a position to disagree with anybody. Not anymore, but what did he do? He rejected the Declaration of the Rights of Man. I don't think he had a leg to stand on. And soon, he wouldn't have a head to look. He wouldn't have a head either. Again, because Louis rejected the Declaration of the Rights of Men, people heard about it. And again, angry mothers who wanted bread for their children, they didn't go anywhere else. This time, they decided to storm the palace. It is said that these mothers were so hungry that they started talking about what body part of Louis they were going to eat once they caught him. Now, they killed 2 guards. Louis hid, and the mothers did not find him. 2 guards were killed, and because Louis was so afraid, he decided then to give in to the assembly and sign the Declaration of the Rights of Man. I want a leg. I want an arm. I want a... They were that hungry? Start with some cheese curds and chicken wings, but come on, man. And nothing was working. The government was going bankrupt. The people were refusing to pay their taxes. The assembly, the National Assembly, because the government was bankrupt, they decided that they were going to print their own money for people to use to buy things. Well, if you print money and it doesn't have the backing of gold or silver behind it, giving it its value, that's not good. You debase the currency, and ultimately you lower the actual power that the dollar has. So what did they do to try and fix the whole situation? Well, they just decided that they were going to take all the land of the Catholic Church. Because that was one of the next things that they had to find a way to get rid of, was the clergy. And by taking their land and by taking their possessions, that was one way to try and fix the economical issues. But things, ladies and gentlemen, they were not looking good. Not at all. So Louis is still alive. The church still exists. But the current status of the church is just about to change. So what the National Assembly then did was they passed a series of laws that ended up establishing something known as the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. And all the Civil Constitution of the Clergy really was, what ended up becoming an agreement between the government and the church. It did 3 basic things. Number 1, it placed the clergy under the control of the National Assembly. I bet you Pope Innocent III is rolling in his grave right now when that happened. No government will be ever over us. Well, unfortunately for Innocent III, the French government now ruled over you. Point number 2, any member of the clergy to be elected into a position of authority within the church, whatever, a church or a leader of a diocese or an archbishop or a bishop, they had to be elected by the people. So now, essentially then, the church officials became a social office. And then finally, it required, the Civil Constitution of the Clergy required all the members of the clergy to take an oath, to be loyal to the state. I mean, ultimately, who does the clergy need to be responsible to and take an oath to? Well, to God. But here, in this radical revolution, you've got them. I mean, yeah, you got to take an oath to the National Assembly. And there were some that took the oath and some that didn't, and they were marked. Those that did take the oath, they were part of the jurying clergy, and those that didn't take the oath were members of the non-jurying clergy. And it was like, either you're with us or you're against us. And those that were not taking the oath, I'm sure they were marked. I'm sure they were circled. I'm sure they were watched, because there was a lot of paranoia during the French Revolution. You didn't know who was your enemy, and you didn't know who was going to take you off to the gallows. All right, so with now the Assembly passing, the National Assembly passing the civil constitution of the clergy, now the clergy is under control. Aristocracy is done. Clergy is done. All that's left to conquer is the king. Oh, and they show him. They show him. They show his wife. And sadly, his children. His children were very horribly mistreated. No. All right, so that's where it starts to get ugly. 1789, that's when it all started. 1790, they say, was a relatively peaceful year. And then things began to change. In 1791, everything went nuts. This is when the majority of the bad stuff occurred. And it's amazing how fast this revolution took off. The National Assembly was able to establish a constitution. But the unfortunate thing is, everybody hated it. Kind of like that Christmas present that you get from your grandma, and all of a sudden, it looks great, it smells great, but you open up the package and it's like, oh, it's not what I thought it was going to be. Thanks for the socks, Grandma. I was hoping for that Mercedes. Cute. So on June 21st of 1791, the king made another stupid mistake. Disguised and leaving the palace in the middle of the night, the king, his wife, and immediate family, they left. They tried to escape in disguise. In disguise. Could you imagine the disguise? What were they wearing? Were they wearing like the nose and the eyebrows and the glasses? Was a French person, when he was met by another guard, another soldier, did he try to speak in an English accent? I don't know, but it must have been funny, because you have the most recognizable man in all of France, and he's trying to be inconspicuous. And where, yeah, exactly. And where were they trying to go? I believe they were trying to go to Austria. That is where his wife, Marie Antoinette, was from. Well, that was considered to be an act of treason against the government. Acts of treason. They met the gallows and the guillotine. Yeah. Oh, by the way, when they did the guillotine, ladies, they made sure that you chopped your hair off. Like all the way up. Because if your hair got stuck when the blade was going down, you would think that the blade was sharp enough to go through hair, but it would bunch up. And then that unfortunately allowed for the blade to only go halfway through the person's neck. And then they'd have to raise it up and then drop it again. So what they would do is, they had a big honking scissors, and they would. You'd probably be fine. Your hair is pretty. They would just put it in. But you guys got lots of hair, and they say that the guillotine was the most humane way to execute somebody. But however, we don't know, because nobody who ever was guillotined has ever come back to let them know how it worked. The National Assembly then finally established its constitution. They forced the king to agree with it. They forced the king to sign it. And then they got together with a new law-making body. So the National Assembly was here, and below the National Assembly you had the Legislative Assembly. And they were the guys that essentially kind of came up with the new laws to run the whole country. This is where we get introduced to some of the most noteworthy characters in the French Revolution, the members of a famous group known as the Jacobin Club. And it had 3 prominent members, and one of those guys is the most, in my opinion, the most famous figure in the French Revolution. So now you enter a phase of the French Revolution that ponders the overthrowing of the king, which at this point was not going to be a problem. Overthrowing the king was not going to be hard. He was at his weakest. All of the nobles were gone, the clergy was gone, I shouldn't say gone, but overthrown. And so now you had 3 prominent groups within the government, which are kind of the same groups that we have here in America. You have the conservatives, which I would consider today to be the Republicans. You have the radicals, and I'm not saying that liberals are radicals, but they had differences of opinions, and so they would be the left or the liberals or kind of the Democrats. And then you have the moderates. The moderates essentially would be the guys who are right down the middle. They were in the center. Left, center, right. Center, left, right. So when you talk about somebody who's conservative and they say, oh, he's so far on the right, well, that comes from this idea. The 3 main kingpins behind the French Revolution in a group, like we said, that was called the Jacobins, were Jean-Paul Marat, who was a professional malcontent. You know what content means? Content means to be satisfied. Malcontent means you're unsatisfied. Professional means you've done this for a long time and you're good at it. He's a professional because he wrote a newspaper. I think the name of the newspaper was called The Voice of the People. The People's Voice? The People's... something like that. And you'll see in the video, when we show you the video, Jean-Paul Marat incited violence often. Georges Jacques Danton, he was a boisterous, he was bombast, he was big, he was loud, he was a big boozer. He's you know, when I picture a big guy, I'm kind of thinking like Mr. Lauber big guy and loud Mr. Lauber big guy, you know, because you can hear Mr. Lauber usually 2 hallways away. You know when he's around. And that's not a bad thing, but that was what Georges Jacques Danton was, and he was one of these Jacobins and one of the leaders of the revolution. And then, without a doubt, the most famous guy was a man who had gone to become a lawyer. And he was one of the smartest guys in the whole revolution. He was a product of the Enlightenment. And his name is Maximilien Robespierre. You will hear his name throughout the video. The Jacobins were doing all sorts of weird things to get the people in the streets of Paris upset about the situation within the revolution. And they would call for heads, guillotines, bring more people that disagree with the revolution, bring your nobles, bring your clergy, those people that did not want the revolution, disagreed with the cause of the revolution. They were very, not insightful, but they were inciting. In the streets of Paris, you had the sans-culottes, Those people that wore the full-length trousers, that were protesting the rich and famous people that wore the knee-length breeches. The Jacobins believed, and this is why they felt as if they were being wronged. The Jacobins believed that the new constitution only favored the middle class, of which these guys were part of the middle class, essentially. But they wanted more wealth, they wanted more say in government. So this is just where we're going to leave off here. I got like 6 slides left. Tomorrow we'll be able to jump into the rest of this, and then should be able to finish the Napoleonic era, the how the French Revolution was kind of summarized. You will have a quiz on 16.2 on Monday. I'm going to probably reorganize the schedule and put the test on Thursday before Friday of May Banquet. If I have the test after May Banquet, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work unless I absolutely have to. So that means that we're gonna jump into the movie either Monday or Tuesday. The test will be on Thursday, and that's how we're gonna roll on that one. All right, French Revolution gone crazy, Revolution gone wild. Next time we'll talk about all the things that were happening outside of Russia or outside of France. We're going to talk about the execution of the king. We're going to talk about one of the most famous eras in the French Revolution called the Reign of Terror. Like, it was bad before, but now it's even worse. And then the new government that gets formed later on, of which Napoleon then becomes the leader. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, you got your assignment, which is going to be the quiz, which is going to be on Monday. And those of you that miss class tomorrow because of the play, good luck. It's good luck. Have fun with the play.